Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Real National Dialogue with myself, Jonathan Mokes, and Paul Berkowitz. Paul, as ever, good to see you. You're looking nice, neat, and smart today. What's happening?
Well, so do you. Nice new haircut, Jonathan. Well, it's summer in Johannesburg, so we've had our first real rain overnight and through this morning as well. Everything is green and the dust is gone, but it's a bit slippery on the roads because the first rains have washed all the oil. I appeal to my fellow Joburgers to drive safely and be careful out there.
Great, thank you for the traffic report there, Paul. It's another string to your bow.
Thank
But
you.
thanks as ever to those tuning in and listening or watching. Just a reminder, as ever, to please follow us on Substack and follow our writings on the South Africa Brief, and do share and like and follow all the updates and news as we put it out there. Some interesting articles coming through in the next few weeks. But today is our usual sort of look at what's happening in the news. We can't always do a sort of comprehensive deep dive, otherwise it'll be the Tolstoy of podcasts because there's so much happening in South Africa. But I think today we'll look at the by-elections coming up on Wednesday. We'll have a look at the race for the mayoralty of Johannesburg with Helen Zille entering the race and certainly dominating the news last week. It's important to look at the PA story. Their deadline set for tomorrow being Tuesday as to getting Kenny Kuneni reinstated. Otherwise, they'll leave the GNU and the City of Johannesburg coalition. And then finally, important just to touch base on the Madlanga Commission. We are also recording this on Monday afternoon as judgment is being delivered in the Julius Malema alleged discharging, should I say, at this point in time, of firearms in East London. So that may come through while we're on the recording, and if it does, we'll have a quick chat about that. So quite a lot to get through. But let's dive into the by-elections, Paul. I know you've been looking at them quite a lot. There are three by-elections, if I'm not mistaken, this particular week, and the ANC is defending all the wards, all three wards, should I say. So the first one is Ward 5 in Elundini, Eastern Cape, which the ANC won in 2021 with 82% of the vote, the UDM coming second and the EFF third. It seems they're facing off against the Africa Unite Congress and the African Transformation Movement. So probably a pretty comfortable win for the ANC, you would think, Paul?
Yeah, I think this is our safest ward without fear of contradiction. Safest for the ANC, Jonathan. It's another Eastern Cape ward. The party's done well in the past. The party has done well defending these wards. As you said, the ANC won the ward in 2021 with 82% of the vote. The UDM then were runners up with 11%. But they're facing off against relative minnows, against the Africa Unite Congress and the African Transformation Movement. Doesn't look like a lot of competition for the party. Um, and I don't know if there's too much we'll be able to read or divine from general trends unless the ATM or the AUC, for some reason, do exceptionally well. By their standards, exceptionally well would probably be anything above 10, 15%, but unlikely.
Yeah. Very much unlikely. And it does seem from the few by-elections we have had that the ANC is relatively still strong in the eastern part of the Eastern Cape, less so in the western half of the Eastern Cape, as we've discussed before, and in the Metro, Nelson Mandela Metro, of course, and Koma, where it recently lost a ward to the PA. Then
Yes.
they're defending Ward 10 in Tshwane, where they just won 47% of the vote to the EFF's 27% and an independent's 11% in 2021. But their share of the vote rose to 59% in last year's general election, and the EFFs fell a little bit. There does seem to be quite a bit of opposition in this ward. So we've got the EFF, the DA, Al Jamar, MK, and the Bolsheviks party. So quite a marked difference in opposition here. Again, Paul, your thoughts on this particular one?
Yes. Should be safe for the ANC, Jonathan. Not as safe as the Elundini ward, but as you remarked, the rise in the ANC share from 2021 to last year's provincial ballot is encouraging for the party. And the crowded field should help the ANC a little as it splits the opposition vote, as you said. What I'd watch out for here is how the EFF will do. As you said, 27% in 2021, 24% provincially last year. Can it grow? What will happen with MK? Will it see any growth in Tshwane? We've seen and we've spoken about wards in Mfuleni, the Naledi ward in Soweto, Johannesburg a couple of weeks ago. Will this be a continuation of the trend for MK in Gauteng? I guess we'll see, but should be safe for the ANC, barring some major upset.
Right. The most fascinating though seems to be in Imalahleni and in Mpumalanga, and I think you mentioned that this is probably the most vulnerable ward for the ANC this coming Wednesday.
Yes, and again, Jonathan, not to be confused with Imalahleni in Eastern Cape. Imalahleni in Mpumalanga is one of the second-tier municipalities, sometimes called the secondary cities. It's large. Historically, the context is that, like most of the province, this municipality was quite safe for the ANC. But in 2021, the party only won 35 seats out of 68. So you do your maths, if it loses this seat, and we'll get to the numbers now, it will be on exactly 50% of the seats and would need to form a coalition, which would be more evidence of erstwhile, heretofore, previously ANC strongholds developing more chips and chinks in the armor. So the numbers are that the ANC won this ward in 2021 with just 49%, to the DA's 29% and the EFF's 9%. In last year's provincial ballot, Jonathan, the ANC came second with just 25% to the DA's 27%. MK got 24%, the EFF got 16%. And then obviously the rest of the vote split even further. But only these four parties, Jonathan, the ANC, the DA, MK, and EFF will be contesting tomorrow. Based on last year's numbers, the ANC could lose it to the DA, but MK is right there in third place, right behind those two. So it looks like a three-horse race. Looks very vulnerable for the ANC. And if we check again the electoral map last year, we know that in the southeast part of the province, MK did very well. Imalahleni is right there on the Gauteng border, just a little bit east of the province. And as we said previously, an ANC stronghold. So if the party should lose the ward tomorrow, it will, number one, be forced to go into a coalition with other parties, if it can get that coalition, which it should. And it will present another area in Mpumalanga where the ANC is looking more vulnerable.
Mm. It's a fascinating one, and I think both in Tshwane and in Imalahleni, I think as you said just now, the EFF MK battle is going to be intriguing to say the very least. We've seen in some Mpumalanga wards how MK has overtaken the EFF, so it'll be interesting to watch what happens in Imalahleni. But I think the DA has probably got an interesting opportunity as well on Wednesday here to build on their recent momentum that they have in by-elections.
Yes, and if the DA should win tomorrow, Jonathan, still a relatively big if, it would be a fairly famous victory for the party, as we said, in a previous stronghold in a ward, which was a vulnerable ANC ward, but probably never been won by the DA before. We've only had one by-election in Imalahleni since 2021. It was a DA ward which was relatively safely defended.
Right. Speaking of the DA, it's been probably what, not probably, it has been 9 days since the worst kept secret in South African politics was ceased to become a secret, and Helen Zille was unveiled by John Steenhuisen as the DA's mayoral candidate for the city of Johannesburg. I must say the DA has done a very, very good communications job over the past 9 days in terms of getting Helen Zille out and in front on the media. She's obviously had that pretty fiery exchange with Anele on 94.7 last week, Monday. There's obviously differing views on whether that was a win for Helen, whether it was a win for Anele. I see Anele was described as Manpower of the Week by the Sunday Times yesterday. But apart from that, quite a lot of debate, quite a lot of driving of the DA message. And it would seem that from a communications point of view, momentum fairly and firmly is with Helen Zille. So she's asking you, Paul, as a resident of the city of Johannesburg, to believe in Johannesburg. That's the slogan for her campaign as it currently stands. And the messaging, just having looked at her speech, was obviously quite high on rhetoric and biography. The fact that despite Helen Zille having spent a lot of her recent life in the Western Cape and Cape Town. Obviously, she was mayor of the city of Cape Town, successive terms as premier of the Western Cape. She was born in Johannesburg. She grew up in Johannesburg. She launched her professional career in the city of Johannesburg. And it's this idea of the prodigal daughter returning home to empower and enable the citizens of Joburg to, I suppose, reclaim their city again. How do you feel about this, Paul, both as a esteemed political analyst, but importantly as a resident of a beleaguered city?
Jonathan, let's start by putting aside Helen Zille, the person, the personage, the personality, what we may feel about her positively and negatively, and that goes for me personally. Um, as a Joburger, my views haven't changed. You can describe this as a homecoming tour, as the prodigal daughter returns. I'm still upset by any party, whether it's the DA with Helen Zille, whether it's the Patriotic Alliance with the aborted idea of making Liam Jacobs a councillor a few weeks ago. I don't like this idea of parachuting people in from outside. The slogan says, believe in Johannesburg. I'd like to believe in our homegrown talent. I think the issue, which is going to fade into the rearview mirror, admittedly, the question we've had when this was first mooted about why the DA doesn't take its caucus leader, who's incidentally my ward councillor, why Mpho Phalatse has fallen by the wayside and doesn't seem to be returning to politics. Why must a politician be parachuted in from outside? Do we not have the homegrown talent? And the chauvinistic Joburger in me says, why aren't we good enough? Why don't we have one of our? And no offense to Helen Zille. She may have been born here, she may have spent her formative years here. Nobody before her campaign knew her as anything else than the mayor of, the premier of the Western Cape, and someone who's worked in the Western Cape and Cape Town for decades now. Okay, so I guess that is my immediate reaction. The other question, which is something that other Joburgers will be asking themselves, is how do you feel personally about Helen Zille? Is it a case, how do you feel about the DA? As you said, a divisive personality, somebody who met Anele in the interview toe to toe. Her supporters would have said she gave as good as she got, that she responded to Anele's stupid questions. Her detractors would have said that she personalized and went on the attack. And there's a gulf between those two opinions. So I think some of the questions which we've asked before, which we asked last year, is whether Zille's responses to some of Anele's questions, and I think the one which is sticking out in a lot of South Africans' minds is the question on Israel and Gaza, whether there's a genocide or not.
Mm.
That's not the question for me. The question is, because the DA was hammered and pilloried for its position on Israel and Gaza in last year's election, it did not seem to hurt the party in Cape Town. Right. So the question that will be answered, one of the questions that will be answered is service delivery and fixing local government the only question, the main question, or will these positions on global events and geopolitics outside of South Africa influence everyone?
Mm.
Um, and I don't think that Zilla or the party's position on Israel and Palestine will hurt the party that much. I'm answering your question. I'm taking the scenic route answering your question,
No,
Jonathan. So
thank you.
appreciate your patience. Will I vote for the DA and Zilla? I haven't decided yet. Um, will I be happy with Zilla as mayor? Okay, compared to previous mayors, definitely. But I think that speaks to where the bar is now, in which circle of hell, of Dante's hell, the bar has descended to. And I'm not trying to damn Zilla with faint praise. She's got a track record in local government and administration. She's definitely better than what we've got. Could we do better than her? And we'll see with the other candidates. Uh, will they be more appealing? I don't know. But as you've said, the DA has been very good on the messaging and campaigning. We know that the party's electoral machinery, coupled with one of the most recognizable and visible politicians in South Africa, is going to give the DA a lot of momentum in Johannesburg. They'll still need to form a coalition. As Zilla herself said, we're not going from 25% to 51% in one election cycle. Will, if the DA finds itself in a plurality, which at the moment, based on current polls, seems to be the best bet, will will Zilla be able to work the magic she did in 2006 and '07 in a very fractured City of Cape Town Council and cobble together a coalition? Will the other parties be able, particularly Action SA, because I think we're going to start to talk about the possible coalitions and the permutations and the combinations. Will they be able to find each other after the quite an acrimonious election is over? I don't.
Mm. Thanks, Paul. Therefore, and it's very beneficial to hear your thoughts and analysis. I think you posed a question early on in your response about why she's being parachuted in, and quite simply, we've discussed this before, and others have discussed this before. The DA see it as their best shot of winning decisively in the city of Johannesburg, and I think a Helen Zille candidacy now gives them the pathway to be able to really win. And when I say win, I'm not saying get 50% plus, but potentially get to close to 40% and really cement themselves up as number one in the city, because she's their most recognizable brand. She is divisive, but she has a track record of running the Western Cape for 10 years and the city of Cape Town for 3 years. I suspect that polling to come out, and I'm sure polling is being conducted by relevant foundations, will demonstrate that Johannesburg is the DA's to lose, in inverted commas, in terms of their plurality. And I think they've got it's really, the question is about competence and service delivery. I agree with you. Gaza, Israel may make for nice headlines, but it has nothing to do with the local government election. If you actually look at the PA's very extreme position in support of
Mm.
Israel ahead of the general election, and particularly given what their electoral market is, didn't hurt them one iota. It didn't hurt the DA's sort of more in the middle, trying to be safe messaging for both sides, which may have hurt them in other contexts, didn't hurt them in the election. So I don't think that's going to have an effect. I also think probably for the first time ever, identity politics, the sort of race politics, which has really hurt the DA before, the this idea of being a white party. I think it's going to be less relevant in the local government election next year in Johannesburg, certainly, than it has been aside. And you can see that by various commentators because of the desperation that people are feeling in respect of poor service delivery. So I think there's a very clear path to victory. I think in terms of the DA's so-called traditional areas, the DA will, and traditional areas by the sort of suburbs, northern suburbs, sort of more traditionally white South African, colored South African, Indian South African areas. I think the DA will hoover up the votes and probably win a number of votes from black professionals, as disquieting as it may be to some black professionals to vote for Helen Zille, but they will vote on the basis of competence. And then, interestingly, the DA has done this countless elections. They launched Helen Zille's, or so not, it wasn't a launch, it was an announcement. They announced her in Soweto. They didn't contest a by-election in Naledi a couple of weeks back, but they did announce Helen Zille in Soweto. So they clearly will have a go in the townships, and I think they'll pick up some votes in the township areas of Johannesburg. It was interesting to see Davie Scholz's projections and numbers, and he thinks that the DA looks set on a plurality. He thinks that the ANC may actually go below 30, even as low as 25%. And that Action SA is going to be decimated by the DA in sort of previous DA areas where Action challenged the DA relatively successfully in 2021. But Action's path, as we saw in Naledi in Soweto, may actually lie in the townships for getting a bit of percentage. So thank you for your patience with me now. I've rambled on for quite long on it, but it
No,
really is I think the story already of next year's local government election.
definitely, Jonathan. I'd just like to quickly respond to the point you made because I think it is going to rest on turnout and potentially differential turnout. I do agree with your analysis. The DA should be able to squeeze Action SA a little more north of the M1,
Mm.
and some of the other parties it's competing with, possibly some of the smaller parties like Rise Mzansi, which did well in traditional DA areas last year. I think the ANC, as well as possibly struggling with turnout in its previous strongholds, is going to face more competition from Action SA and from MK.
Mm.
Uh, Whereas in the past, it didn't really face this competition. So a worst case scenario for the ANC, Jonathan, would be poor turnout in Soweto, in Alex, in the CBD, in Hillbrow, and to have that limited turnout be quite contested and fragmented across the parties we've spoken about. I do think a sub 25% share of the vote is on the cards for the ANC. You mentioned Naledi, a previous stronghold, part of Soweto. I think the party only got 32% a couple of weeks ago. So if
Mm.
that's the high watermark, ward by ward for the party, um, yeah, we can dare to dream, those of us who are not in the ANC camp.
Yeah. And there was a really good article by Mandy Wiener, who's written a book on the formation of the GNU called The Deal, and her article reflected on an interview she'd conducted with Helen Zille, and she spoke about Helen Zille's strategy of being very binary in politics, and the whole point of last year's general election strategy of the DA, which was to set up the DA against the doomsday coalition of the ANC, MK, and EFF, and how the DA really had to focus on squeezing the so-called smaller parties. And I think in the city of Johannesburg context, it's that's what she's going to do. She's going to position it as DA versus ANC, Helen Zille versus Della Moreira. Even if Herman Mashaba comes along in those areas, as you say, north of the M1, I think Herman Mashaba is going to be squeezed relentlessly by the DA because people will want to unite behind Helen Zille to prevent any return to the chaos that has really hurt Johannesburg up until now. And then in the coalition scenarios, I mean, that's going to be really fascinating, because if you get into a situation where the DA decisively is the leading party, it'll probably need Action SA plus a couple of other smaller parties to get itself over the line. Or I suppose it could do a grand coalition in Johannesburg with the ANC, but I doubt Helen Zille would go for that because of the binary choice. And I suppose the other option is all the others, sort of ANC, EFF, MK, but probably needing the Action SAs of the world to get them over the line, which of course would then just once and for all put Action SA on the other side to the DA, which is of course what the DA strategists will be wanting. So I think certainly, as much as it may annoy some people, I think the DA is just firmly on the front foot and not probably, are definitely playing the best political strategic game at this stage of the game.
Yes, on the front foot, Jonathan, and looking to unleash those sumptuous cover drives through the field to continue the metaphor. Yes, I just hope as a resident that the laboratory of Johannesburg, once the dust settles, we're left with a functioning government,
Yeah.
and we are not just used as a further example of poor coalition politics and what can go wrong at local government level.
Yeah. The caveat, of course, is that it's Monday, the 29th of September. The local government election is only probably the earliest scenario is kind of an early November date next year. So that would be what, 14 months away. The old
Yes.
adage of a week being a long time in politics does apply. The DA have gone very early, not just in Johannesburg. They've announced Elias Brink for Tshwane. They announced Hanif Hoosen over the past weekend for eThekwini, which we'll have a look at. We'll look at the eThekwini election campaign, which is another fascinating one with MK probably on the front foot there, but a lot to go. But maybe staying with Johannesburg, because Johannesburg really does consume so much, and that's a big deep sigh, Paul.
From the bowels of me, Jonathan.
The Patriotic Alliance. So Kenny
Mm.
Kenny, who was the MMC for transport and is the deputy leader of the Patriotic Alliance, there's an ultimatum given by Gayton McKenzie to the ANC that unless Kenny Kuneni is reinstated as the MMC for transport in the city of Johannesburg by tomorrow, the PA will exit all coalitions with the ANC. That, of course, critically includes the Government of National Unity, where McKenzie seems prepared to step down as the Minister of Sports, Arts, Culture, and Recreation. And of course, they would pull out from Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni. So where all this stems from is Kuneni having resigned his position as a councillor after he bizarrely was discovered at the home of an alleged murder kingpin, KT Molefe. But then the PA, as I understand it, Paul, commissioned a independent report from a law firm,
Yes.
which declared Kuneni innocent. On that basis, Liam Jacobs was then redeployed to Cape Town because he had been appointed as a councillor in Kuneni's absence. Kuneni was then restored. So I think he was sworn in Johannesburg on Friday. But now Dada Moreira had been leaning towards giving the transport portfolio to the EFF. McKenzie is absolutely adamant that it has to go back to Kuneni. And I think since all the developments ahead of the weekend, Ramaphosa seems to be intervening to try and get this sorted out. But we'll see tomorrow. I believe the ANC and the PA are meeting, but this has big implications for the Government of National Unity and for stability in the Government of National Unity. Normally, until now, it's been the DA that's been fighting with the ANC with its various red lines. Now there seems to be a pretty definitive red line from the PA.
Yes. So let's deal with the potential chaos or at least change at those various levels of government. Well, let's talk about the GNU and then the city of Johannesburg, Jonathan. Obviously, there are other coalitions the PA is in, but I think those are the two most crucial. And then we can talk about my personal feelings for the party and for Kunene, particularly his stint as Transport MMC, only if there's time for us to get all the vitriol out. So we've spoken a lot, Jonathan, about the GNU and the numbers. And if I'm not mistaken, the PA has 10 seats in the National Assembly or thereabouts.
Mm.
So if the PA were to exit the government to national unity, the most immediate effect for me would be to strengthen the DA's position in the government to national unity.
Mm.
If if the GNU loses the PA, it cannot afford to lose the DA. It would push the number of seats in the coalition down to about 190. Action SA and Ibosa, who have been courted by the ANC in the GNU ever since Budget 2.0 and 3.0, I think only have 8 seats between them, so the GNU would still end up in a deficit. There's a limit. There's only that a few other parties running around, the National Coloured Congress, etc., that would be there to make up the numbers. You would now be talking about an 11 or 12 or 13 party coalition. So that's the immediate effect in the GNU. It wouldn't collapse the GNU. It would make it a lot harder for the ANC to kick the DA out and maintain stability in national government. It would also, I guess, then have an effect on the various factions within the ANC and how the anti-DA versus the pro-DA, it would indirectly strengthen Ramaphosa's hand a little. So there's that. But that's not going to collapse the government overnight. In the city of Johannesburg, the PA also has 10 seats, and there they are critical. Even particularly since Action SA and the ANC have parted ways in Johannesburg over the past 2 months, Jonathan, the PA leaving the Joburg coalition would almost certainly collapse it. There'd be a very good chance, and Gayton McKenzie has said as much, that he'd be interested in forming a coalition with the DA in Johannesburg were that to happen. And that's we may get a DA-headed coalition in Johannesburg if that should happen. I don't think it will make the PA, Gayton and Kenny, any less avaricious. They would still demand their 2 MMC positions. Kenny Kunene as MMC of Transport, what has he presided over? Well, we've done the research. He's presided over the worst spending rate of conditional grants that are allocated to the transport department out of all the metros. Very ignominious statistic to have under your belt. Obviously, Lillian Ngoyi, formerly Bree Street, reopened, not properly paved, paved with bricks, which has resulted in a number of jokes among the commentariat. So not a great transport MMC. Not someone where I could go, a credit to the council. But the PA is not a serious party, Jonathan. I mean, it's serious in how well it does, but as the social media has been saying, Gayton seems to run on vibes.
Yeah.
It's not so much that Kenny is important in and of himself, but the position is important. If you're going to hand it to Liam Jacobs, again, not a son or daughter of Johannesburg, not someone who's dealt with local government, whose tenure as an MP was more about the spectacle that he brought to Parliament from his TikTok videos. Again, as a Joburger, I feel disrespected, Jonathan. Not that my personal feelings are that important. What I'm seeing on social media, probably read through my own lenses and biases, is that people are starting to get a little bit tired of Gayton and the PA in terms of the demands and the lack of actual achievement. If Gayton does step down as Minister of Sports, Art and Recreation, what will he have achieved as well?
Yeah.
Bringing VAR to South Africa, presiding or being there in the background while his son secures the buying of the SuperSport soccer franchise. A number of disgruntled artists and creators. There's a very good article in the Daily Maverick this week about the various arts festivals that have had their government subsidies cut. I don't know what the party's actually done for the people of South Africa, but here we are.
Well, there you go. You're giving a bit of a blueprint, which I'm sure the DA is looking at. I'm not so sure about the ANC, whether they've got a campaign infrastructure still in place in Luthuli House to look at these things, but that would be a good line of attack to a PA, which, as you've said, Paul, is growing and very, very threatening, as we've said on previous occasions, to the DA and the ANC in the Western Cape and also parts of the Eastern Cape. But yeah, I mean, so big impact on Johannesburg if there's a pulling out, less so in the GNU. I think Gayton McKenzie also went on record as saying that even though he would pull out of the GNU, he would still support Cyril Ramaphosa against any motion of no confidence because MK had reached out to the PA to see if they would support MK's mooted motion of no confidence, but it would very much strengthen the DA's hand. My
And
personal,
there's an implicit threat there, isn't there, Jonathan? Because Gayton is the kind of man that likes to make threats.
yeah,
There's a message being sent to Ramaphosa, who must be a little bit worried, to say, look, you're vulnerable. I got your back for now.
yes, for now.
Things might change next week. I'm that kind of guy.
Personal prediction. I think the meeting ends with them buying each other a bunch of roses and Kenny Kenini being reinstated as MMC for transport. And I think the DA will breathe a sigh of relief because I don't think they want to be in government before the election. It won't suit the narrative that we were talking about earlier on. So it really suits them as much as it harms the residents of Johannesburg having this government continue in the city of Johannesburg. But I think in order for Helen Zille's campaign to succeed, it needs to be in opposition.
Yes, and I think that last point of yours is a very good one, Jonathan. It's something that has been discussed a little bit in our house as well. Does the DA want the Joburg hot potato,
Mm,
uh, where there isn't enough time to turn the city around, particularly with coalition partners that you can't really trust,
mm.
like the PA, who are only in it for themselves? Possibly better to pick up the pieces after the election. Not great for us as Joburg residents, but probably the smart move for the party.
Yeah. It's the pragmatism of politics, sadly, which affects us all. Paul, with the remaining few minutes that we have, let's check in on the Madlanga Commission, which, as ever, is ongoing and testimony is happening as you and I record and speak here. I think the big question that emerged from last week and the testimony of South Africa's National Police Commissioner Fani Masemola was, did President Cyril Ramaphosa know about the disbandment of the Political Killings Task Team? So, according to Masemola last week, then Police Minister, now special leave or Minister on special leave, Senzo Mchunu, said to Masemola that Ramaphosa had given his blessing implicitly, that he was aware of it. Masemola said he didn't believe that that was the case, but it was notable over the weekend that people are now talking about the prospect of Cyril Ramaphosa himself having to come and testify before the commission, which apparently would have to be in camera because of national security reasons, but it would be, highly explosive stuff. I think also hitting the news over the weekend was the fact that the evidence leader, Terry Matau, had wanted to leave the commission, but was persuaded to stay by Madlanga, the chair. So that, I think, is a bit concerning for the sustainability of the commission and the fact that it needs to, as we've spoken time and time again, try and get this done pretty quickly so that there can be some decisiveness. And then as we record this today, Monday, Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo, who's the head of crime intelligence, is has taken the stand. He was quite central to the operations of the Political Killings Task Team, so it's likely I haven't seen all the testimony today, Paul, but it's likely, I'm sure, that he will corroborate much of what Makonazi, Masemola, and others have said about the disbandment of the political killings task team. But it does seem that some roads are leading to the presidency.
Yes, yes. Unrelated, but I think maybe to give context. So if I'm connecting disparate dots, let me know.
Mm.
We know that Ramaphosa's nephew, one of his nephews, is implicated in the stealing from Tembisa Hospital.
Mm.
Another thing, without going into it, we don't have time, is that we've seen in the last 2 days is the Special Investigations Unit
Yes, of course.
um, talking about 2 billion rand being looted from
Mm.
Tembisa, and one of the president's nephews is implicated. So I'm not surprised that Ramaphosa may have a hand here. Um, yeah, that would not surprise me. As you said, the evidence led today by Khumalo is about the political killings task team, and the relationship or the different treatment that previous Minister Becky Cele had to the PKTT as opposed to Senzo Mchunu.
Mm.
And yeah, not much else to say about that now because this is happening live.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think pretty much every day that the commission goes on, it opens up more and more questions. I still, and I'll repeat myself for the 10th time, think this really does damage the ANC even more, because I think one of the key issues that South Africans deal with and live with is safety, and this has really just struck a dagger in the heart of any claims that the ANC can have that it is strong on criminal justice. I mean, we know it's not, but this has really just decimated its record on that, together with the decimation of its record on the economy, on fighting corruption, on basic service delivery. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see what the testimony this week brings. And if Ramaphosa does testify, albeit being in camera, it's going to make him even more vulnerable than he already is. So lots, of course, that we have discussed. Lots more still to discuss. I think when we come back again, we'll obviously have the results of the by-elections that we've previewed. We'll obviously have a result on the PA ANC standoff. We'll have a lot more to digest from the Madlaga Commission. But I think, Paul, you've referred to the SIU report, I think preliminary reports on the Tembisa hospital. I think it's very important to look at that. We'll also unpack what may or may not happen in the judgment of Malema today. South African politics, never a dull moment at all.
No, and just as a small teaser for what we'll be looking at in the near future, Jonathan, because election season is heating up, we've got books that have been published and are being reviewed this week on Malema and on our Deputy President Paul Mashatile.
Yeah.
So a lot more dirt is going to be dished, a lot more muck is going to be raked in the upcoming months. I don't think any of it, as you said, is going to be good for the ANC. We'll see if this book by Paulie van Wyk is damaging for the EFF as well.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Paul, as ever, thanks so much for your time and for your insights, especially as our resident Joburger. And until next time, stay well.
Always a pleasure, Jonathan, and to you too. We'll be back together next week with another edition.
Great. Thanks very much.